Well, hey, welcome to Slice of Life. Pastor James, that's Pastor Jenn. She's my wife. If you don't know that, you might have recognized her from season 1, episode something or other, that never actually happened.
That's right.
Right. So we actually recorded a whole. It was the last one. It was last of the year.
Yep.
So it would have been episode 18 of season 1. And everything was great except for we had no audio. So it was an awesome hour conversation with my beautiful wife that never happened. So excited to have her come join me episode or season 2. And we're going to talk about marriage. It's probably the biggest request I've had from our fans, like we've got a lot of fans, but from our fans. So we're gonna talk a little bit about marriage today, what a biblical marriage looks like, and just kind of share a little bit of a heart with individuals. It's something that you and I, if they would have heard episode 18, they would have got a little bit of background story, right? So we got to give a little background story. But Slice of Life, hey, just FYI, if this is the first time you've ever listened before, it's all about how do I live a Christian life? What does that look like? What does Christianity look like in a day-to-day basis? Because I think sometimes we make it too Christianese, we make it too religious. It's a life lived out. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about. I think that's how you and I attack our marriage as well.
Yep.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
Woohoo, guys! I'm not in the doghouse yet. That's pretty good. So a little bit of background about our story. You and I both come from broken homes, right? Go ahead, Pastor Jenn, go ahead, share a little bit. She is a licensed minister, so when I call her Pastor Jenn, I don't call her Pastor Jenn at home. So just know that, I love you, Pastor Jenn. We don't do that, but she is a licensed minister, Church of God, a ordained minister, highest level of credentialing within the Church of God. So go away. Don't go away. Go for it, Pastor Jenn. Tell a little bit of your story here.
Okay, so my parents met and got married very quickly in the midst of...
They met in Alaska.
They met in Alaska.
Right.
Yeah, my mom ran away
Hey,
to
Alaska peeps.
Whoop, whoop.
Woohoo. Catch a can.
All you catch can people. All right, so they met in Alaska. My mom ran away from home to Alaska because that was really far away, I guess.
Yeah.
And met my dad.
And when she says run away, like it was after high school. It wasn't like she ran away from her home when she was, still in high school or as a little child. But
yeah.
Her and her sister, right?
Her and her sister ran away to kind of get away from some drama back at home. And so they ran away to Alaska, met my dad. They connected, got married very quickly. I am the third child of 3. So I'm the baby, only girl of the 3 of us. And then my parents got a divorce. In the midst of that too, my dad is a minister. So it's kind of a unique situation. He's a minister. He's remarried. My mom and I moved away. My brothers lived with him for a while, and then they lived with us. But different boyfriends, different husbands. My mom's been married a few times. She's with longest standing marriage right now. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Which is awesome. We love it.
Yeah. So you guys moved from Alaska, I think, down to California, right?
To Oregon.
Oregon, and then to California, and then kind of back into Oregon.
Yeah.
Right.
So lived in all of the states on the West Coast. So
we hit them all, right?
We like them all.
And so my story, which is so Jenn was born in Ketchikan, Alaska.
Yep.
Right. Well, I was born in San Antonio, Texas. So, which is to me, it's really, really cool when we think about the 2 largest states in the United States.
Yep.
2 that are very, very far away from each other.
Yep.
And we met in the middle. So when I was young, I don't know how young. So I was born in San Antonio. Then we moved to Tucson, Arizona. Yep. And at some point in between that move is when my mom got divorced. And so again, middle of 3. You're the youngest of 3. I'm the middle of 3. An older brother and a younger sister. And so we moved to Tucson, and we weren't there very long, and then we moved up to Oregon, and basically lived in the Willamette Valley of Oregon, Independence, Oregon. Hey guys, we lived there, but my mom as well, broken family, broken home, um, both sides of my family as well, and in fact, we're talking about grandparents, all the way back, grandma. My mom's mom was married 5, 6 times, somewhere in there, 7 times. I'm always getting corrected. Right. For those men, you know what that's like, right? The wife is the keeper of all knowledge.
Yes, get the stories right.
So she gets the story right.
Staying.
So, but we bring that up because we were both raised in brokenness, right? We're and without an understanding of what a biblical marriage looks like. I did have a stepfather for quite a few years, although I knew he was my stepfather because he made it blatant that he was my stepfather. But I have one good story out of all the years that we were together. And so, growing up, I remember, and I love, I tell this story, and I tell it for a reason because I think it helps people understand how broken my life was, and you share the same one. I was raised in a Christian home. Mom was a Christian. My stepdad, yeah, I think so. I believe so. In his own way, as he fought with his life, but. As a young child, even before I liked girls, remember guys, girls had cooties, and, but I didn't love my life. I didn't love my family environment. So I started at a young age, I'm talking 8, 9, 10, praying for a wife, and really believing that God, loved me enough that he would do that. And it actually, I'm one of those odd guys that didn't really date. It's not that I didn't go on dates, but I didn't really date anyone, because I believed that God would show me who I was going to marry. And I believed that throughout high school. And then I met this beautiful woman, July 28th, at a Crazy Days Parade in Dallas, Oregon.
That's right.
Right? Woohoo! Dallas, Oregon. I think I was the dragon that day, the smoke-free dragon of the class of 2000. Boy, are we old. And I met her, and I called my best friend up and said, "Hey, Joe. Hey, Joe Jamie. What's up, man?" I said, "Hey, Joe, I met the woman I'm going to marry." And he said, "You're crazy." And so I proved him wrong. But, so that was kind of our history. And we did. So a couple years later, basically, we got married. Joined the Air Force. That's a whole other story. Joined the Air Force, and we got married. And a year and a half later, roughly, we had our first child. And the 4 years after that, had another child. And call it quits at 2, which is great. That way, at this age now, we get to have all the fun we can. So. If you're gonna have kids, have them early. So then, when you're in your 40s, you can go play and go on vacation, and your kids are okay. But I think that was the kind of the start of this idea when you and I started dating, and we began to have conversations about marriage. Because obviously, guys, just FYI, I already knew we were going to get married. So really, it was about me convincing her. Right, to convince her, like, hey, we're supposed to get married. God told me,
and that's not the line to use, by the
way. That's the best pickup line ever, right? Christian man, you find a Christian woman at church, say, "Hey, God spoke to me." No, please don't. I'm joking, because I've heard people use that. They've actually, hey, we've got individuals that we know. They're like, "Well, God told me we're supposed to be married." No. Yes, it happens.
Yes,
but
it does.
but we're a weird combination. We're a weird story.
Yes.
And again, because I was praying at 10. For so we had those conversations when we got engaged. and not knowing what marriage was, not from that mindset, not understing the financial world as well. Came from Both of us came from poverty, you know, and so it was a struggle. It was a struggle because we had no examples. I can't think of any real examples in my life.
I had one.
Yeah.
My grandparents, and I say that
Adopted, right?
adopted. Yeah, my mom was adopted, and my mom and my uncle were adopted into family, which is interesting. Like the cousin of my biological grandmother, him and his wife could not have kids, and so they adopted my mom and my uncle, and then of course most people that go through adoption, as soon as they adopted, they had babies.
Yeah.
So there ended up being four of them, but they were the only Christian couple that I was around that I could really watch. Um, and they, you know, they're older. Clearly, they're my grandparents.
Yeah.
So they never fought in front of people. In fact, to the point where my mom, when she got married and first got married and had her first fight, she thought there was something wrong with them
Yeah.
because her parents never fought in front of the kids at all, like not at all. And so that's also not the greatest example because people argue. but but that was the only couple that I knew that were Christians that were long standing
Yeah.
relationship that seemed to be healthy.
Right, where you could actually see into their
Yes,
life.
I could see
I
them.
think obviously we went to church, so I can think of some people off the top of my head that I can tell you that seemingly had great marriages.
Yeah.
But when you're not in and out of their lives,
Yeah.
seeing it, it's a little different. So
Yeah, anybody can put a face on for Sunday.
for Sunday, right? Yeah. So we got married, and moved down to Beale Air Force Base, Northern California. 8 hours away from our family.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, that was, you had cell phones, right? But
We didn't have a
but
cell
we didn't have cell phones because we couldn't afford them because they used to be expensive.
Yeah.
And
And there was email, but we didn't have a computer.
yeah, yeah. Boy, we are old.
We are.
And believe it or not, it costs money to make a phone call, long distance. So it actually ended up being probably one of the best things for us.
Yeah.
That when we moved, we had to work out our problems by ourselves.
Yeah. Together.
We had nobody around. And being an airman in the Air Force, you don't have any money, right? It's you have no money, so we didn't have money, so it was just you and I. And when we had a fight, we had to reconcile that together without running to our friends, running to our families, And I think when you and I, which we do a lot of times, marriage counseling, pre-marriage counseling together, we try to. Because I think it's really healthy. Those of you that are wanting to get married, I think it's very healthy. Find a couple that have been married for a long time, and the counterbalance is really good, right? But we had to figure it out for ourselves and work through and realize that we're it, So if we didn't talk to each other, we weren't talking to anybody else, right? Because we are, again, new to the area. Really didn't have friends. I was a firefighter in the Air Force, which my schedule was 24 on, 24 off. So she was home all day by ourselves for from 7:30 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. Right, and then I'd come home and we'd spend the day together, all day together. And when you have no money, you don't go anywhere. Right. And again, no internet. So we had TV and VCR.
NES.
And the Super NES. We played so much Super Mario.
Yes.
Loved it. But that was us. And I think, when we talk to people in pre-marriage counseling, that's one of the things we say is get yourself away, right? For the first several months specifically, you know, distance yourself from your family. I know that sounds really harsh, but to realize that when I have a disagreement with her, I have to work it out with her. I can't call my parents. I can't, you know, talk. I shouldn't talk to anyone else,
Yeah.
right?
No, you have to work it out for together because it's you. You know, your family and your friends are not in the marriage.
Yeah,
They're not part of it. And it's our nature to go and complain to friends or family or whatever.
especially those who have our side,
Yeah,
right? They're on our side. Right?
they're on your side. So you're getting a one-sided thought process. They don't know the whole situation. And you are slanting your story
Yeah,
to you
right.
because it's your opinion and your view.
Yeah.
There's three sides of a story. There's mine, there's his, and there's the right part in the
Yeah.
middle.
Somewhere in the middle, there's
It's
truth.
the
Right.
truth,
Yeah.
right? And so you really have to learn to be a couple. And if you don't do it in those first few months, then there's
Yeah.
not that connection. I think about like when you first get married, it's kind of like having a newborn, right? They have to connect and bond with you.
Yeah.
And if you are constantly running to other people to solve the problem, you're not bonding together.
Yeah.
And then that kind of creates some issues going forward.
Yeah.
Going forward.
Yeah. No, it's good, and I think that was such a big part of our life because we were forced to.
Yeah.
We were forced to find that reconciliation between ourselves, and there were some fights, there were some problems, there were some issues, bigger than just the Parmesan. Parmesan cheese, does it belong in the fridge or does it belong in the cupboard, right? Bigger than those, and again, I think it forced our hand to figure out how to fight,
Yeah.
and how to fight fair.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, which is one of the things we love to talk about. I think, going back to scripture real quick, the scripture says a man will leave his father and mother and cling to his wife. The expectation biblically is to do what we just talked about.
Yeah.
Is that we leave the father and mother, we leave that world, and we cling, we become one. And to your point, how can we become one if we're always reaching out to other individuals? But I think we move on, and we begin to think through that process of not only the cleaving, then in that moment where we come together and we're one, but then learning to fight fair.
Yeah.
Which
And-
sounds like wrong, like almost
Yeah.
like an oxymoron. How can
Yeah.
you fight fair?
There's a right way and a wrong way to fight. And we are different people. And I say it that way.
Hey, by the way, I was wearing this shirt first. If you don't, if you're not watching us all right, I got a blue shirt. She's got a blue sweater on. So we did not plan this.
No.
Okay.
But
because we are different people.
We are different people, and we came from different families that fought different ways and solved things different ways.
Yeah.
And so when you come together as a couple, I remember the first time that we got in a heated discussion, whatever you want to call it, argument. You got super mad and you walked away. And that made me so mad. I'm like, you are not leaving right now. We are solving this. But you needed to leave.
Yeah.
Or it was going to actually get worse. And I did not understand that because in my family and in growing up and whatever, you talked it out and no one left until it was resolved. And that's just how it worked. And so for you to walk away was like, what's happening right now?
Yeah.
And because we're different people and we came from different backgrounds, and every couple is like that generally, we had to figure out, like, I had to realize that there were times that we had to take a break.
Yeah.
I
needed a timeout.
Yeah. And there were times where you needed to realize that I needed to talk it out.
Yeah. Yep.
And you needed to not walk away
Yeah.
at that moment or, something. And so we had to come up with, how are we going to do this? How are we communicating? How are we going to and fight fair?
Yeah.
Not bringing up past hurts, not. And if you're a woman like me, you remember all things for a very long time. And so it's very easy to bring up fuel for
Yeah.
fights when you don't need to.
You always do this because
Yeah.
you did blah, right?
Yeah, because of
Yep.
past, because of that. And we had to come up with words that we don't use.
Yeah.
Always and never are not realistic.
Yeah.
You don't always or you don't never. I mean, we like to as people to use that. Oh my gosh, you're always doing that, or you never pick anything up. But is that real? No, we're just
Yeah.
exaggerating to make the point. So we
Right.
had to come up.
Well, but they're damaging words.
Yes,
And
they
I think that's the issue there. You know, even if someone does it 99% of the time, it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
It's the idea that always it basically equates that this is who you are.
Yeah.
You know, it's a derogatory term, and people don't realize that.
Yeah.
You know, always, never. You know, it labels someone, and automatically then therefore will put them on the defense.
Yeah.
You know, instead of now talking about the situation that we're looking at, I'm beginning to defend who I am.
Yeah.
I'm beginning to look back, and I'm looking for, like I'm in a courtroom, proof that no, I'm not always. Don't you remember that one time? You know, I
Yeah.
picked up my underwear. Remember that one time I showed you I did it.
Yeah.
You know, so now I'm working backwards.
Yeah.
You know, to try to prove to you that that's not who I am, and I think that's the struggle when we talk about fighting fair. That's such a big part of that. Is again understanding the fighting style of individuals.
Yeah.
You know, I'm more of a ninja. You know, I'm kind of I need to kind of have my space and to find my area and silently kind of go back and you know, and you're kind of more of like a boxer or you know MMA fighter. Like let's just
Hey,
chokehold the whole thing, right? Well,
yeah.
we're gonna punch this thing out.
Yeah.
You know, and yet what I need so often is for me again is that quiet time to process. I love to you know, that's just who I am. I process things, and knowing that I need to process and check my emotions, especially younger in my life when I had such an issue with anger, temper. My temper was so bad. You know, I realized that, and so I had worked on ways to try to make that better. But yeah, fighting fair, then, you know, it's that piece. It's the piece of, to your point of again, being cautious with the words that we use,
Yeah.
the always and the never, and this is
The
just
name
who
calling.
you are. Name. Oh yeah. Well, and you know, one of the words that kind of going back to kind of the beginning when we first started talking about marriage is, you know, realizing not only do we not know how to do it, but there were certain words that we put off limits
Yeah.
immediately.
Immediately we can.
And let me just speak to some people because the first one was divorce.
Yep.
We immediately took that off the table, and we took that off the table jokingly as well.
Yeah.
Like that word will never come out of my mouth in connection with you.
Yeah.
Right, that as we talk, I don't talk about, I don't like when I get rid of you, that you know, and some of you might be like, well, that's just silly. No, when you come from a broken home like we came from,
Yep.
right, there's no comedy in divorce.
No.
You know, in fact, it really bothered me. We just watched a kids movie the other day.
Yeah.
She's a kids pastor, right? So you know, we're watching movies, and it was Spellbound, right? Is that the name of it?
Yeah.
You know, and throughout this whole movie, just kind of, it was weird. I just kept feeling like,
Yeah.
and at the end, it's about divorce. Like it's okay for them to be divorced, and that I felt like they made it very light, like
Yeah. Like it's not a big
it's
deal.
not a
It's
big
normal
deal.
thing. Yeah.
It's not a big deal, and it's in that case, it was, you know, uh, it just felt wrong, and I think, you know, can I just encourage people that those who are married or getting married, take that one off the playing field.
Yeah.
I will not. I'm not talking about divorce. I'm not talking about leaving you. I'm not talking about a new wife. You know, no, that is never in. And I, you know, well, they don't know me, but you know, I'm a joker. I love to
Yeah.
joke. You know, that's just who I am. But I think to realize that divorce is never a conversation part. Joking, anger, nothing.
Yeah.
Right?
It's almost like when you allow yourself to use that word in your marriage, you always have that plan B, back door, the exit,
Yes. Right.
the like maybe, I have this plan in the backside.
It's like a prenup.
Yeah.
You have a prenup. Well, what's a prenup? It's just in case we get
In
divorced.
case we get divorced, I get to keep my stuff.
We're at the point of we
No.
will not get divorced. I mean, it's just like because it's not allowed.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that it's so important to have those boundaries
Yeah. Yeah.
because, and if you set them up in the beginning, I mean, we talked about the divorce part of taking that off the table before we were married. It
Right.
wasn't like we had our fight and we got in a big fight and we used the word and then we're like, we shouldn't use that
Right.
anymore. It was, no, this is before we even jump into this.
Yeah.
That is off
Yeah.
the table.
Yeah.
This is not going to be talked about.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if either one of us even had the inkling that that was a possibility, then I didn't want to get into it. You didn't want to get into
No.
it, right?
Yeah.
Because we had seen what it done not only to us but our parents and everyone that's around them, right? And I think having those conversations and before we got married was incredible.
Yeah.
But let me tell you, if you're currently married, it's a great time to have those conversations.
Yes.
Honey,
Yeah, if you're already there,
yeah. Let's take these things. Yeah, this is no longer right, no longer, and it's harder to do it at the back end, but it's healthy to do it.
Yeah.
To have those. What are the things that we're not going to talk about? Right. What are the things that we don't use even in a joking way?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's good. And then, we also talked about like not only are we not using that word, but we're not thinking about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like we're married.
Yeah.
I mean, there are situations that fall into place where you shouldn't be together, abuse,
Yeah.
those kind
Right.
of things.
Right.
But we kind of talked to have those conversations like
I told her if she hits me, I'm out.
I'm out.
I'm out.
But more of like, if you're going to say yes to this,
Yeah.
this is for life. This is
Right.
not, so don't take it lightly. This is not, and I remember we weren't even engaged. I was like, when I get married, I'm married for life.
Right.
It's not changing.
Right.
That's my plan.
Yeah.
And I know that most people don't go into marriage thinking, oh, I'm going to get a divorce. But we do have it in the back of our minds that it is an option.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
especially in our environment today.
Yeah, today.
Because when we were in school, it was bad still, but we weren't the majority or an equal.
Mm-mm.
Coming from a broken home, most of our friends didn't come from a broken home.
Yeah.
I remember one of my friends, his parents went through a divorce in high school, and it was odd. I was like, well, welcome to the club, buddy.
Yeah.
You and I can get together. But so many of our friends had never dealt with that. Now it's hard to find people who have been married for a length of time.
Well, and so like you're saying, so when I was in elementary school, I got made fun of because my mom had a boyfriend.
Yeah.
And that was just weird. Like,
Right.
why would your mom have a boyfriend? She
Yeah.
should have a husband.
Where's her
It should be
husband
your
at? Yeah.
dad, So I kind of got made fun of a little bit. And then as we got older, it didn't become more normal, but it was more often than it was
Yeah.
prior.
Right.
And then our girls went to Christian school, and our youngest daughter had, there was a group of 4 of them.
Yeah.
And 2 had married, you know, 2 or 3 of them were with their mom and dad, and the other 1 or 2 was not.
Right.
And so it was more of a 50-50 type of a situation across, and that was at a Christian school and a Christian environment.
Yeah.
And
right.
it is more of a 50-50 situation. So now, it's not a shock, it's not a thing. It's just, and it's sad that the statistics are not outside of a Christian environment. It's across the board marriages, Christian or not.
Yeah.
You
Yeah. Although it's been interesting that you brought that up. Recent stats as they're diving into those numbers, are showing those that are um, who label themselves as Christian, but also are consistent in church, and that is more than once a month. That is 50% basically that they're going to church 50% of the time, or greater. That those divorce stats, and it just came out. Families in Ohio came out with this really interesting study. I need to share it with you now that I think about it. But the divorce rate drastically drops. So the divorce rate's around 50%, right? But those that are not just label themselves Christians, but actually are engaged in a church, their divorce rate drops to like 20%. It's an incredible number.
That's awesome.
And again, the only difference is that they are actually invested in church.
Yeah.
So same belief system, right? All these other people are saying they have the same belief system, but their divorce rate is no different than the world. But then those that don't label themselves as Christians, but then those that are actually engaged in church, all of a sudden, the family structure is stronger, their marriage is stronger, their finances are better, their sex life is better. This is PG-13, so that's okay, right? All these demographics as they show, and these are studies directly in Ohio, just Ohio, which is where we're based right now. But they ring true throughout the United States as well. As we're looking at, or this group is specifically looking at the family being the nucleus of a healthy nation, and trying to figure out what makes a family healthy, what's going through. And so it's an interesting study. So how do I have a better marriage? Go to church.
Be engaged.
And be engaged in church.
Yeah.
To be going more than just on a Sunday, engaged in small groups. They say the more engaged you are in the community of the church, the better your marriage, the stronger your family is. Looking at children, right, and those that the same stats. It's amazing when you begin to look at those that are engaged in church, families engaged in church. The kids, their graduation rate, their grades, their how they go on and make money, right? Their poverty level, all this other stuff begins to greatly increase the more engaged in church they are. It's so incredible. It's just blatantly out there, and yet we deny it. And what do we see in our nation today, where divorce is so bad, and so many are being raised in single parent homes. So many kids are being raised in single parent homes. Poverty levels, all this other stuff, crime rates, all this stuff, right? You begin to look, and in fact, there was a case study done in Florida. If I had the stuff here, I'd share it. But a case study done in this community in Florida where they begin to work on the family structure, and it was a high latent crime area, the whole thing, and within, I think it was within a decade, it radically transformed everything, right? Because they worked on the family concept. They got people in church. They got them engaged in church. Crime rates get down to almost nothing. One of the best crime rates in America. And they're like, is all because they focus on the family. Not a plug for the company, Focus on Family, but they literally just focused on the family. And it focused on the marriage first.
It has to start there,
right?
If your marriage isn't strong, your family's not strong.
Exactly. Right. And to I think what we're talking about is so apropos for this moment, because when we look at that, the getting things off the table, divorce, and that, like, there's no out, that when I said I do, I meant I do.
Yeah.
Never I don't. And therefore we're going to work it out. We're going to figure it out. If that means we have to go to counseling, we'll do that. If it means whatever it means, we're going to figure this out. And I think having that mindset, and obviously that means that both parties have to have the same mindset.
Yeah, you both have to be in agreement. And I think that's why I started that conversation before we even
Yeah.
were, is like, before we go farther. So a little bit more background. My mom always had someone, and so in my life, I thought that that was the normal. So
Yeah.
unlike him, who was praying for his wife and all of that, in first grade, I had a boyfriend, and my mom thought it was so cute, um, so growing up, that's what I did. I had a boyfriend all the time.
Yeah.
What did that mean? You know, most of the time, it doesn't mean anything,
Yeah.
right? Um, but I got to a point right before I met him, where I was like, you know what? I need to focus on my future.
Yeah.
I need to focus on my grades, and I need to stop being so focused on having relationships, because why do I need that in my life? What is that filling for me?
Yeah.
Because it's not filling something right now that's good. And honestly, in high school, it can lead into a dangerous situation. I mean, just,
It's more work than it's worth,
yeah,
more drama
yeah,
than you really need. Yeah.
it is. It's, and,
Yeah.
and what do I need to do? So I had just actually, as crazy as this is, we're walking to the parade for the Crazy Days parade. And we're walking, and I just got back from seeing my dad and had connected with my friend. She had spent the night, and we're walking from my house to the parade that we're going to do. And I'm like, I'm not having a boyfriend this year. I'm going to get a 4.0 because grades are really important to me. I'm going to focus on what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And God has such a funny sense of humor, because we get to the parade and I get in the truck and I see him. And that's how we met.
That's right. This
Um,
beautiful man that's in front of you right now.
and it's the first time we met officially. It's not
Yeah.
the first time we actually saw each other, but
Right.
but we met, and I honestly thought he was in college. I thought he was dating the girl he was talking to. I wasn't really focused on that, but we met, and then that kind of kicked things off. And that was in July, and by September we were dating. And my friend goes, what happened to you're not dating anyone? And I'm like, well, this seems to be a little bit different. I don't know why this is different.
Yeah.
Because like he said, he knew he was going to get married. I did not know that that's what was happening.
Yeah.
But you know, it ended up, we started having conversations right away about marriage. And we seemed to be on the same page with those concepts of, this is my whole future.
Yeah.
It's not a glimpse in my future.
Yeah.
It's not a season of life. It's what, if I'm going to say yes, it's forever.
Well, it wasn't. Yeah, we were not dating to date. We were dating to get married.
Yes.
Right. Which again, I know that's odd, especially in high school. And I'm so grateful for God that he did that, and that we were wise enough to see that. But I think so when we think about marriage and how important it is, really to everything, right? To everything. It's important, obviously, for our kids, for our health. Married couples, they live longer. I mean, just again, every stat you see, healthy marriages produces health,
Yeah.
all the way around. And we talked about, obviously the words that we take off, right? Fighting, that we take out of our language, the fighting fair concept. But I think one of the things too that I found important, I think, in our marriage is the equality piece. And what I mean by equality is that we're in this together.
Yeah.
I always cautious about individuals when they talk about their finances. I make this and she makes that. I pay the bills and she does this, right? I give my wife an allowance. That overall concept.
Yeah.
And I know I'm probably getting some people shutting off right now, you know, b- because that's how they work and it just works for them. Great. No, biblical standard is not that. That we are equal in this.
Yeah.
My money is not mine; it's our money. Your money is not yours; it's our money.
Yeah.
And we kind of attacked it that way the whole time. Now I do the finances, You
Yeah.
know, I take care of the bills. She's aware of them. You know, I'm not talking about that concept of that we, you know, both pay bills. We both, right, that would be crazy. You know, one of you probably is a little bit more financially intelligent than the other person, right? I enjoy it. I love the finance part. She works for a bank right now, which is pretty funny that I said that out loud. But so I just I've always done it.
Yeah.
It's just who I am, right? Um, and so I think, you know, that's okay when we think through that mindset. But I don't give her an allowance. We talk about budgeting. We talk about where our money is, what we should be doing. We talk about the things that are coming up and struggles. We talk about retirement. We talk about all those items, you know, and so we're aware of what each other is doing, you know, and so when I talk equality, I'm talking in that mindset, you know, and not only financial, but I think even like in the home,
Mhm.
you know, one of the biggest fights we hear about is housework,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Who's doing what?
Yeah,
And the equality of that.
yeah.
And
He
I
never does anything at
he
home,
never does
or yeah,
anything. And I can tell you, like, okay, so you really have to look at your situation.
yes,
Okay.
yeah,
So at the moment, I work a full-time job outside of ministry.
yeah,
Okay, and so we come to the church Monday through Thursday, and I work from home, right? Or at the office. Um, and while we're at the church, and then when I have a minute or I'm on my break or whatever, I'm working on children's ministry stuff, or if he has a question or whatever, and he's doing ministry the whole time.
yeah,
And then we go home, and generally we usually go home, and I log back in because I have another hour or so to work, and so he can do stuff at home if he needs to. Okay, he enjoys outside work. I'm not such a fan. I like to be outside. I am not about yard work. I definitely am not. I'll do it, but I'm just like, I'm not a gardener. I'm not that lady who likes to plant flower. I like flowers. I just don't. I kill them. So, um, um, so he does the gardening and stuff, and he'll ask me like, "What do you think? What kind of flowers? What kind of?" Because there's some things that I don't like, right? But I'm more focused about inside the house.
yeah,
So we have had situations where I did not work.
yeah,
And so it's not realistic for me to think, well, why isn't he doing the dishes, or why isn't he doing the laundry, or why? Because he's working. He works
yeah,
a full-time job and you're at home. Now, if you have kids, I was a stay-at-home mom. Okay, great. And I homeschooled my kids. I get it. I get it. You're also working. I'm not saying you're not working, okay? But you need to really look at the concept.
yeah.
Um, there was a point
Well,
in our
your
life.
season, right?
Yeah,
What
there's
your
a season.
in? Yeah,
Yeah. And are you working a full time job outside? Is he, you know, do you need to come up with a plan? You might have to have a conversation of, okay, what's the one thing you hate? Like, he cannot do dishes. Or he, okay, I'm going to say it. He doesn't like to do dishes.
yeah,
And I have a particular way of loading the dishwasher, and he doesn't. So if he does it, I just ignore it, and then he has to put them away because I can't do it. But for right now, his back is hurts in a way where the up and down of a constant whole load of dishes would hurt his back, and could create some problems. So he can't. So that's why I say he can't do dishes. Well, okay, so then that means I'm on dishes duties if I don't have. We have one of our adult children live at home, and so she should be able to do the dishes as well, right? But laundry, he hates to fold laundry. Okay, fine. So years ago, we came up. Then I will fold if you will wash them.
mm-hmm.
Okay, so come on. He loves to vacuum. Okay, go ahead. That's fine. Go ahead and vacuum.
Yeah.
Find stuff that you like to do or don't like. And if you both don't like, nobody likes dishes, okay, because they're never done,
Yeah.
right? Nobody likes laundry because it's never completed. That's one of those things. It's just you get it done for the day and then it's right back. But you can come up with concepts, but you also can't have unrealistic expectations about what the other spouse should be doing.
Right.
And the whole concept of, well, it's 50-50. No, it's not. And I've seen this a lot in the last years. It's 100%, 100%. You're both in it 100%.
Yeah.
And if you are struggling, if you really do feel like you work, he works and then you go home and one of you is doing the majority of the house stuff,
Yeah.
then maybe you do need to have a conversation about what that should look like.
Yeah.
But
It's the expectation.
it's the
right?
expectation that's unmet and not
Yes.
spoken
Yes.
most of the time.
Right.
Like if you have this, okay, they can't read your mind, you can't read theirs.
Yeah.
So if you have an expectation, you know, if you have an
Yeah.
expectation of some kind and you're not saying it, how do they know?
Yeah.
And then you're upset. Well, and they don't know why. And then you're mad that they don't know why you're upset.
Right. Because again, men cannot read your minds. We barely can figure our own mind out, let alone figure out what you guys are thinking. But again, yeah, and it's such a big deal. Expectations leads to everything else.
Yeah.
It's the unmet expectation in all of our life. I mean, in everything that we do, not just marriage, but in everything we do, there's always an issue, and it's normally driven, right? It's normally driven by unmet expectations.
Yeah.
You know, I talk about church world all the time, depending on if you're a pastor, depending on how many people you have in your congregation, that's how many job descriptions you have.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they have an expectation of what a pastor should do. You know, one person has an expectation that if they have a hangnail, that the pastor is going to be at the hospital with them. Yeah. You know, another one, I don't want the pastor there unless I'm dying, like I'm going to die, you know. Right. Different expectations. Yeah. You know, I expect the pastor to call me every day. You know, I remember I called one lady, I think it was on our first full term pastorate. I called her and she goes, don't ever call me again. I will call you if I ever need you, you know? Yeah. So an expectation, but I think in marriage, it's such a big deal. You know, we talk about housework, we're talking about, you know, that whole thing, the 50-50 or however you split it, right? That concept of, yeah, I'm all in. But if there is a moment where you're feeling some kind of way, you know, we come home, we both worked full time. I've cooked dinner. Now I've got to do the wash the dishes, and he's watching the football game. Have that conversation. Yeah. Have the conversation. And if you're fighting fair, it'll be a good conversation. Yeah. Right. And you'll be able to work through that and find out what the true expectations should be. Yeah. Because maybe this guy is, you know, maybe your husband, you know what, he's had a rough day that day. And, you know, all he needs is that hour to watch, you know, TV or play a video game or whatever it is, to blow some steam, right? Whatever that is, you know, or maybe the guy's lazy and you got to work, you know. Yeah. But until you talk about it.
Yeah, you have to have the conversation. And it might also be from their family.
Oh, their upbringing.
Yeah. Yeah. So they watch their mom do it all, and their dad come home from work and sit down and not help out.
Yeah.
And
the kind of the old style of life, which
it used to be
how it was, right? The husband came back because the wife's been home all day, and I want my coffee or whatever, and you know, let me know when dinner's ready. I'll be reading the paper. You know, and obviously in our world today, that may not be the same same thing, right?
And it goes both ways.
Yeah.
We've heard of people, and we've met people that it's the opposite, where the woman is reacting that way and the man is doing kind of everything.
Right.
You know.
Right.
And it flows the same way.
Yeah.
Expectations.
But if you communicate it, and that's what we're talking about, communication. If you okay, we've been married 34 years. 1993, 32 years.
Thank you.
Wow, 30.
We've been together for 35.
Okay. I'm sort of right.
35
but 32 years, that's funny. 32 years. We're married 32 years. And, you know, if people would ask us, like, you know, how'd you guys do it? I think it's communication. Yeah. It has been the key. It's communication of, obviously, what do we say, the fighting correctly, the expectations, sharing what those are, and you know, not that our marriage is perfect, you know, because no marriage is perfect, because it's two imperfect people from different backgrounds that are coming together, trying to become one. You know, when the world is trying to tear them apart. Yeah. You know, so many things trying to pull us apart. But I think when we kind of get down to it, it's communication. that we've kept that line of communication open, and we're intentional about it as well. And I think that's such a big part. I think one of the things that we like to caution married people with kids specifically, you are married, um, and you're always going to be married.
Mm-hmm.
That someday your child is going to move out of the house,
Yep.
more than likely, and you're going to be left alone. And if you've not worked on your marriage for those 18, 19, 20 years, however old your child is, you're going to be married to a stranger,
Yep.
and so the intentionality of going on dates, as we got older and we could afford it, we, you know, yearly vacations. Well, one year we would go with the family as a family. The next year we'd go alone.
Yep.
And you know what? We still do it. We got a 30-year-old and a 26-year-old.
Yep.
And we just went to Disney World,
Yep.
as a family, and that was last year. This year we went on, and you and I went on our vacation together, and even when our daughters were younger, in high school, and when we could, we would get away together. We made that habit at least every year. You and I would actually get away for a couple days, to continue to work on our marriage, because she's it for me. I mean, for the rest of my life, this is who I got,
Sounds so great.
I
doesn't
know,
it?
right?
You're
No,
like,
but honestly, and so
Yeah.
if I'm not working on this, if we're not working on
Yeah.
our relationship together, yes, our kids are important and we need to invest in them. But one of the best investments that men, can I talk to you for a second? And one of the best investments that you can ever do is to invest in your kids by showing them how you treat your wife. When they see that, when they see a loving husband that cares for, protects, encourages, washes her in the word from the scriptures, just that encouragement of saying how incredible she is, and lifting her up and being a champion. And when your kids see that, when your boys see that, they go, okay, well, that's the kind of husband I want to be. When your daughters see that, they and I laugh because my daughters have both told me this. Dad, you've set the bar so high, it's hard for us to find somebody to marry.
Yeah.
They're 26 to 30. They're not married, and now I'm getting old enough. I do want to talk about grandkids. I want them to be married. I want them to find the right man.
Yeah.
But I'm so excited, because what we were able to do is break the generational curse in us, where we've been married longer than anyone else, first marriage in our family, and be able to see my daughters who didn't get married right away, haven't been divorced, aren't pregnant, don't have kids out of wedlock. All those things, and the reason for that is because we modeled for them. I believe we modeled for them a healthy marriage, and for them, when they start dating a guy, they hold him up to the standard that they saw, and they're like, well, he's not treating me like my dad treats my mom, right? He's not doing the same things, and can I tell the story of Jordan? Should I? No, I said her name. So love you, Jordan. So with Jordan in high school, right? She ends up dumping a guy,
Yes.
brutally dumping him. I was so proud.
Mom was not
I
proud.
probably should not have been.
I was ready. I was ready to go to his house and have some words with him, and then I found out it was her.
She dumped him via text, right? And we found out by social media. But proud dad moment, because again, that was it. She's like, you know what, Dad, he's not treating me like you treat mom, and he's not changed. It's not gotten any better. I've talked to him, and so I don't need that in my life. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So man, be the best husband. Be a great father, but be the best husband you can be, because that's the legacy you're going to leave for your kids, is you're going to train them. You're going to train the boys how to treat a woman,
Yeah.
right? And you're going to train the women you're going to train the women what they should expect from a man.
Yeah.
Not these boys out there, but from a man that is there to love and protect,
Yeah.
right?
And it goes for the women too. I mean, we need to be encouraging and lifting up and washing in the word, and we need to be great wives,
Yeah.
not mother wives,
Right. Right.
wives.
Yeah.
Okay. We need to make sure we're treating our husbands with the respect, and not only the respect, but you're not their mom.
Yeah.
You know, my
Oh,
biggest pet peeve on
yep.
the planet
Knew this was coming.
is when a woman says, "Oh, yeah, well, I have 3 kids, my 2 daughters and my husband." Drives me up a wall because your husband is not a child.
Yeah.
Okay. I know. Okay. So
Eh,
he games. He likes to video game, right? He loves video games, and I do some of it, but not most of it. But my girls are into video games, so they connect that way. He loves Legos. My girls love Legos as well. So he just got Legos for the first time a few years ago from my daughters, actually. But
Such good girls.
right. So he goofs around, he jokes, he's doing all of that stuff, and I get it. But that's who he is he's a man, and that's who he is. I am not his mom. I'm not his mom. I don't want to be his mom. And I don't want to treat him like
Yeah.
he's a child.
Yeah.
And I think, honestly, in our world today, women are so driven and expectant that a man is going to act that way. So they treat them that way.
Yeah. And it just
And,
enables them
and it
to then not grow
yeah.
up.
Like, okay, well, if you're going to treat me like my mom, then I'm going
Yeah.
to continue to act like
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
But we need to teach our girls how to treat a man.
Yeah.
As much as dads, you need to do that for girls. Women, we need to do that for them. We don't badmouth them. We don't talk about them. You having a problem with your husband, your children are not the person to talk to.
Amen.
Okay? They are not your friends. That's the other pet peeve I have. Oh, yeah. I love the day that I had my best friend.
Yeah.
Because especially when they get to high school,
Yeah.
for girls, women, we start to treat our daughters like they're our bestie. They're not our bestie.
Yeah.
You need to find a female adult woman
Yeah.
that you can be besties
They still
with.
need you to be the parent.
They still need
Yeah.
the mom, and they don't need to hear about the dad or what they're doing. And you shouldn't do it to boys either. But we're trying to show boys also how women should be treating them with
Yeah.
respect.
Yeah.
It's a huge thing for us.
Well, and because TVs, movies, I mean, you see the negative. I mean, you think
Oh, yeah.
any sitcom right now. I mean, just think about it. Or you've got a dumb husband and a beautiful wife. Right? Normally, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of what it is. And the husband does dumb things, and the woman everyone loves Raymond.
Yeah.
She calls him idiot all the time. All those things, and yeah, it's funny. But for some reason, we begin to emulate that.
Yeah.
And that's not what it should be.
No.
Again, it should be a healthy picture, especially if you're a Christian husband and a Christian wife.
Yeah.
It should be a healthy picture of what the clinging, to your wife, what a oneness is. And we can spend a lot of time on parenting. We can spend a lot of time on so many different aspects of what marriage is. But, when we come down to the very end of the story, we've got to get to the point where we say, well, what are we doing? What are we doing in this thing? And asking basically asking the end question is, so if you could wrap it up, Pastor Jenn, if you could wrap it up in one statement, how do you have a healthy marriage, right? What is the key to marriage in your in your opinion?
I don't know if there's one key, but I would say God-centered.
Yeah.
And the communication piece that we talked about. Because without communication, true communication,
Yeah.
communicating with truth and love
Yeah.
at all times, communicating.
Yeah.
Because without that, you can't. And without God, you can't, because you end up turning to worldly solutions
Right.
without God. So God-centered with a lot of communication.
Do you mean
Lot.
like communication? Yes.
Yes.
She means communication.
A
And
lot of
And I don't think I can't put it any better than that, because at the end of the day, how did we stay married? As long as it was God.
Yep.
All the faults, all the struggles, all the stuff that we've dealt with, it always gets back to the point of God, because in our mind, God joined us together. Let no man put us under, which means me and you.
Yep.
No one. And so I think, being that God centered, it just kind of like, okay, well, then therefore, again, there's no divorce,
Yep.
and so we keep God at the very center of that. And if there are things I wish we would have done differently. There's some things I'm glad we did it the way we did it. Our marriage was not perfect at the start. It's not perfect now, and it won't be perfect at the end. We made a lot of financial issues or decisions that weren't correct because we didn't know anything about finances either. We just didn't do all the right things. But we kept the main thing, which was God, and that we were going to stay married, and never once having that conversation of, well, we're just done, or I'm even thinking about done. Like there's no done, till death do us part. She may have wanted to kill me sometimes, but to get to that point, it's a very difficult moment to be in, but it's also freeing. To say, okay, then I'm so in that there is no out. And so I just really encourage you, if you're dealing with marriage issues, you're thinking about getting married. Again, I think the biggest thing is find a couple of godly individuals who have been married for 10 plus years. I'd say if you can get them into 2 decades, that's great. Because by that point they've probably raised kids and have been through it. Don't listen to these guys who've been married a couple years. They have no clue what they're talking about. At least get past 7 years. 7 years is the big one. But Christ-centered, God-centered individuals, and that you see their marriage not just from a Sunday morning, right? That you see that you've had an opportunity to see beyond that and get counseling from them, get associated with them, and especially the younger couples. Let me just encourage you: find an older couple. If they have a godly marriage, and you come up to them and you say, "Hey, can you mentor us?" I guarantee you, if they're worth anything, they're going to say yes. And if they say no, you just got really lucky, because you don't want to listen to them anyways. But a godly husband and wife, if a young couple comes up and says, "Hey, man, can you mentor us? Can you talk with us?" They're going to be right there, because they're going to understand the value of marriage. So hopefully this has been helpful. Again, follow us on our social media stuff. If you have any questions, comments, if you liked what you heard today or didn't like it, you can comment as well. But have any questions or really have any questions for Pastor Jenn about stuff, I'm hoping to have her back and talk about children's ministry, which is what we talked about the last time. It didn't happen. But just some other things as well, because healthy families are so important. That's something I know that I'm working on this year. Just working within the church, trying to figure out how do we help create healthy families, healthy marriages, and training up our kids. But have a blessed day, and again, share with people what's going on here, and just let us know. God bless.